When you're working with Azure files, granting access isn't just about using storage keys or SAS tokens anymore. Instead, you can take a more secure and manageable approach by using identity-based access control. This lets you assign permissions to users, groups, or applications using Microsoft Entra ID rather than distributing long-lived secrets. In simple terms, identity-based access means you're giving access to a file share based on who someone is, whether that's a person, a group, or a managed identity tied to a VM or app. Instead of sharing passwords like keys or generating temporary links like SAS, you're saying, hey, if this identity is part of this group or has this role, then they are allowed to access this share. This improves both security and auditing, especially in large enterprise environments. When you want to secure Azure file shares using identities instead of access keys, you have two main options depending on your setup. If you are operating in a hybrid environment or running traditional applications, you can use Entra domain services. This lets your users authenticate with their domain credentials using Kerberos, enabling seamless access from domain-joined machines, perfect for lift and shift scenarios or hybrid cloud configurations. On the other hand, if you are fully in the cloud or looking for modern identity integration, you can use Microsoft Entra ID. With this method, you assign access to users, groups, or manage identities using Azure RBAC roles. No need for domain join. This works even with Azure VMs running Windows or Linux, and it keeps things cleaner and more secure. To control access, you'll use one of the following built-in roles. Storage file data SMB reader grants read-only access via SMB. Storage file data SMB contributor allows full read-to-write access via SMB. Storage file data privileged contributor adds the ability to manage share level permissions. You can assign these roles at the storage account or individual file share level. This gives you precise identity-driven control over who can access your data and how. Before you can enable identity-based access to Azure file shares, there are a few key things you'll need to have in place. First, make sure you have a storage account with Azure files, either in the premium or standard tier, depending on your performance and cost requirements. Then, ensure you've enabled Microsoft Entra ID or Entra Domain Services integration, depending on which identity model you're using. If you're planning to use Kerberos authentication, you'll also need an Entra joined or domain joined virtual machine, so users can authenticate using their existing credentials. And finally, ensure that your environment supports SMB version 3 or later, with encryption enabled to keep data protected in transit. With these pieces in place, you are ready to start using secure identity-driven access to your Azure file shares. Let's get on the Azure portal and see this in action. For identity-based access to Azure files, while creating a storage account, you choose the primary services as Azure files as shown. On the Advanced tab, you then select Default to Microsoft Entra Authentication in the Azure portal option as shown. Once done, just ensure that your machine is domain joined as discussed, and your identity should have appropriate role assigned. So what's your key takeaway? If you're serious about security, compliance, and clean operations, using identity-based access for Azure files is a no-brainer. You get fine-grained control, better security hygiene, and tighter integration with your identity governance practices. So next time you are provisioning a file share, skip the key and assign the role. Let your identities do the talking and the accessing.